I've never been one for family drama, but this year my mother-in-law and especially my sister-in-law Lauren did everything they could to turn our first Christmas with our daughter into absolute chaos. And I'm not exaggerating. It was a mix of manipulation, guilt-tripping, and full-blown power play. From the start, my husband Matt and I had planned to spend Christmas at home. Our daughter Sophie had just turned 6 months old, and we wanted a cozy, stress-free holiday without any traveling. We had already bought a tree, put up decorations, and I had started planning the holiday menu. But 2 weeks before Christmas, Lauren called. "So, we've decided that Christmas is going to be at my place this year," she announced, as if it was already set in stone. Mom agrees. I was caught off guard. Lauren had a small house, not at all baby-friendly. She lived alone, and her kitchen was about the size of a pantry. I tried to gently explain that we weren't planning to go anywhere. "Lauren, Sophie is still so little. We wanted to stay home where she's comfortable." "Oh, come on," she cut me off. "It's Christmas. Everyone has to be together. Do you really want to be all alone? That would look terrible." I sighed. This was only the beginning, and she was already using guilt as a weapon. Matt overheard the conversation and raised an eyebrow. He knew his sister had a habit of imposing her will on others, but even he was surprised by this. The next day, my mother-in-law, Janice, called me. "I think you're underestimating how important it is for Lauren to have family around. She's alone. It's hard for her. But it's important for us, too, to spend our first Christmas with our daughter at home," I said. "Well, if you're more comfortable excluding family from the holiday, then by all means, do as you wish," she replied coldly. There it was, the passive-aggressive guilt trip. Matt, hearing this, took the phone. "Mom, we can't travel with Sophie. It's just not practical for the baby. If Lauren wants to celebrate with us, she can come over." "But she's already planned everything," my mother-in-law snapped. And that's when the real circus began. Lauren kept changing her plans every single day. One minute she said she was hosting dinner for 10 people, the next she claimed she had drastically cut the guest list. Then, suddenly, she told us we were the only ones invited. A few days later, I got a message from her. "I think you're being really unfair to me. I spend all my time alone, and you can't even come over for one evening. That's selfish." At this point, it was just outright emotional blackmail. I was already stretched thin. I had a baby to take care of, and I didn't want to get dragged into this ridiculous game. But the worst part came just days before Christmas, when she suddenly announced that she was canceling everything. "I just don't see the point in celebrating if you guys won't come," she said over the phone. I was stunned into silence. But just hours after that, she posted a picture in the family group chat. It showed a beautifully set holiday table with the caption, "The best Christmas surrounded by family." In the photo, there she was, sitting with my mother-in-law and a few other relatives. Everyone except us. I knew she did it on purpose to get a reaction. But you know what? As I looked at my baby Sophie, sleeping peacefully in her crib next to our Christmas tree, I realized something. This was the best Christmas. No drama. No manipulations. Just us with the people who truly mattered. I knew traveling with a baby for Christmas was a terrible idea. Every instinct in my body told me to stay home. But after days of relentless pressure from my sister-in-law, Lauren, and my mother-in-law, Janice, Matt and I finally caved. The guilt-tripping, the manipulation, the constant insinuations that we were selfish for not coming. It wore us down. So, against our better judgment, we packed up our 6-month-old daughter, Sophie, and embarked on a grueling 4-hour drive to Lauren's house. It was a disaster from the moment we left. Sophie, normally a calm baby, screamed through half the journey. She hated the car seat, and no amount of soothing from me or Matt could settle her down. The traffic was horrendous, turning what should have been 4 hours into nearly 6. My back ached from twisting around to comfort Sophie, and by the time we finally pulled into Lauren's driveway, my nerves were already shot. And then we stepped inside. Lauren's house was small, much smaller than I had realized. It wasn't just cluttered, it was packed. Every surface was covered with decorations, dishes, random junk. The guest room, which we had assumed we'd be staying in, was stuffed with Lauren's workout equipment and old furniture. "Oh, you can just crash on the pull-out couch," she said with a wave of her hand. "It's fine." I stared at the tiny, lumpy couch, my brain immediately flashing to Sophie. "Where's the crib?" I asked cautiously. Lauren blinked at me like I had asked for something unreasonable. "Oh, yeah. I didn't think you needed one. Just put her in bed with you." Matt's jaw clenched. "Lauren, she's 6 months old. She needs a safe place to sleep." Lauren rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, you guys are so dramatic. Babies sleep anywhere. Honestly, I think people baby their kids too much these days. When we were little, Mom just put us in a drawer or something." She laughed like it was a joke. I didn't laugh. Janice chimed in from the kitchen. "You young parents act like your babies are made of glass. We didn't have all this nonsense when we raised our kids." I shot Matt a look. He exhaled sharply through his nose, and I knew we were thinking the same thing. This was going to be a nightmare. And it only got worse. Lauren's dog, a hyperactive golden retriever named Milo, had free reign of the house. He was sweet but completely untrained, jumping on people, knocking things over, and worst of all, barking. Constantly. Every time Sophie so much as moved, Milo would start barking like crazy, startling her into a fresh round of wailing. Lauren found this hilarious. "Oh my God, she's so sensitive," she giggled as Sophie sobbed in my arms. Milo isn't even touching her. She's a baby, Lauren, Matt snapped. She's not used to a loud dog jumping all over the place. She'll get used to it, Lauren shrugged. It's good for kids to be around animals. Helps toughen them up. I wanted to scream. The noise, the lack of space, the complete disregard for Sophie's comfort. It was all unbearable. But I bit my tongue and tried to make the best of it. We were already here. I just had to survive the next 24 hours. Then Lauren started making her passive-aggressive remarks. At dinner, Sophie, already overwhelmed and overstimulated, refused to eat. She kept fussing, turning her head away from the spoon and rubbing her tired eyes. Lauren smirked. Well, she's really fussy. Milo eats anything I put in front of him. I froze, my grip tightening on Sophie's spoon. She's a baby, Lauren. Not a dog. I'm just saying, she said airily, sipping her wine. Some kids are just picky, I guess. Matt's hand closed over mine under the table, a silent warning. I could feel his frustration mirroring mine, but we both stayed quiet. Then came the gifts. Lauren handed out presents, all smiles and fake warmth, and when it was Sophie's turn, she pulled out a tiny wrapped package. I saw this and just had to get it for her, she gushed. I unwrapped the gift, and my stomach dropped. It was a chew toy. An actual rubber dog chew toy. For my daughter. For a moment, I thought I had misread the situation, that maybe it was just a baby teether shaped like a dog toy. But no. Right there on the tag, durable for aggressive chewers. Silence fell over the room. Janice chuckled awkwardly. Oh, Lauren, you're terrible. Lauren grinned. What? It's basically the same thing as a baby teether, right? Milo loves his, so I figured Sophie might too. I slowly set the toy down on the table. I felt Matt's whole body tense beside me. And that was it. I stood up. We're leaving. Lauren's smile faltered. Wait, what? Matt was already grabbing our bags. We're done, Lauren. We never should have come. Lauren looked genuinely stunned. Oh my God, are you serious? Over a toy. I picked up Sophie, who had finally fallen asleep on my shoulder despite the chaos. This isn't about the toy. It's about everything. You have disrespected us, our parenting, and our daughter from the second we walked through the door. We're not staying another minute. Lauren's face turned red. You're overreacting. Jesus, you two have no sense of humor. Matt turned to his mother. Mom, if you ever want us to come for another holiday, you will never let something like this happen again. Lauren shot to her feet, tears welling in her eyes. So that's it? You're just leaving? In the middle of Christmas. I didn't even dignify her with an answer. I just walked out the door. Behind us, I could hear Lauren burst into loud, dramatic sobs, wailing about how we had ruined everything. Janice was trying to soothe her, but I didn't care anymore. As we strapped Sophie back into the car seat, Matt let out a long breath and looked at me. I'm so sorry. I shook my head. Let's just get home. And with that, we drove away from the most chaotic, insulting, and exhausting Christmas I had ever experienced. I don't know what exactly made me agree to this trip. Maybe it was the relentless guilt-tripping from my sister-in-law Lauren, who had spent weeks acting as though our decision to stay home for Christmas was a personal betrayal. Maybe it was my mother-in-law Janice calling every other day to remind us how important it was for Lauren to feel included, as if we were personally responsible for her happiness. Or maybe, deep down, I just wanted to avoid the inevitable drama that would come from refusing. Either way, Matt and I found ourselves packing up our 6-month-old daughter, Sophie, along with half the house's worth of baby supplies, and preparing for what I already knew would be an exhausting, unnecessary trip. And I was right. The journey itself was miserable. Sophie, who had never been a fan of long car rides, fussed and cried almost the entire way, and no amount of toys, pacifiers, or gentle reassurances seemed to calm her down. The roads were icy, the traffic was slow, and Matt was visibly tense behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly every time the car hit a patch of black ice. We had to stop twice just to settle Sophie and feed her, which only prolonged the drive and made Matt even more frustrated, because he hated driving in the dark. By the time we finally pulled into Lauren's driveway, I was already regretting everything. Lauren greeted us at the door with an exaggerated smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the kind of smile that said she was already annoyed at us for being late but wanted to pretend she wasn't. Oh, look who finally decided to show up, she chirped in a tone so saccharine it made my skin crawl. I was beginning to think you'd flaked. I forced a tight-lipped smile, too exhausted to argue, and stepped inside, only for my heart to immediately sink when I took in the state of her house. It was a disaster. Not just messy in a lived-in way, but truly unsafe for a baby. Clothes, shoes, and random junk littered the floor, and there was absolutely no clear space to put Sophie down. There was no baby-proofing of any kind, no high chair, not even an empty spot on the couch where I could set her diaper bag. The entire place smelled overwhelmingly of strong perfume and, beneath that, something distinctly unpleasant, like a mix of mildew and wet dog. Speaking of the dog, Lauren's French bulldog Bruno. He came barreling toward us at full speed, barking loudly and jumping up on Matt's legs before turning his attention to Sophie, who was already overstimulated and immediately started crying. Oh my God, Lauren, can you put him away for a second? I asked, trying to rock Sophie to soothe her. Lauren rolled her eyes dramatically, as if I had just asked her to chop off a limb. Oh come on, he's just excited. She needs to get used to animals. She's 6 months old, Matt said, his voice clipped as he shot Lauren a warning look. She doesn't need to do anything. Lauren sighed like we were ruining her night and finally grabbed Bruno's collar, dragging him into another room while muttering something under her breath. I barely had a moment to breathe before she started up again with the passive-aggressive commentary, clearly still annoyed that we had forced her to put her precious dog away. I just don't get why people act like having a baby is the hardest thing in the world, she mused as she poured herself a drink, not even looking at me as she spoke. Bruno is basically like a baby, and I managed just fine. I blinked, certain I had misheard her, but she continued rambling without a care in the world. I mean, I have to feed him on a schedule, I have to take him out constantly, and he even has separation anxiety. I haven't slept through the night in weeks because he wakes me up whining. Honestly, it's basically the same thing as having a kid. Matt clenched his jaw so hard I thought he might break a tooth, and I had to take a deep breath to keep my own temper in check. I don't think it's quite the same, I said, keeping my voice carefully even. A baby is a little more complex. Lauren shrugged dismissively, already losing interest in the conversation now that she had gotten her little jab in. I don't know. Bruno's a handful. I mean, he even had colic when he was a puppy. You guys really have it easy. Matt shot me a look that practically screamed, don't take the bait, so I bit my tongue and let it go, knowing full well that nothing I said would make a difference. The rest of the evening wasn't much better. Lauren had apparently invited a few of her friends over, something she hadn't bothered to mention to us, which meant the already cramped house felt even smaller, and Sophie, already overtired and overstimulated, was quickly becoming inconsolable. Every time she cried, Lauren would sigh dramatically and mutter under her breath about how Bruno never made this much noise as a puppy, as if that was a fair comparison. By the time dinner rolled around, I was holding onto my patience by a thread, and then came the final straw. During the gift exchange, Lauren handed me a small, neatly wrapped box with an innocent smile that immediately put me on edge. Something special for Sophie, she said sweetly, and for a brief moment, I let my guard down, thinking maybe, just maybe, she had actually put some thought into it. But when I unwrapped the box, I didn't find a cute baby outfit or a soft plush toy like I had expected. Instead, I pulled out a rubber dog toy. A squeaky rubber dog toy shaped like a bone. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but when I looked up at Lauren, she was sitting there watching me with that same smug little smile, waiting for my reaction. Matt leaned over my shoulder, took one look at what I was holding, and immediately stiffened. Lauren, I said, my voice deadly calm, is this a dog toy? She giggled, waving a dismissive hand. Oh, come on, it's just a fun little thing. It's soft, it squeaks. Babies love that kind of stuff. And Bruno loves his, so I figured Sophie might too. There was a heavy silence as I slowly placed the toy back in the box and stood up. We're leaving, I said. Lauren's smile faltered. What? I said we're leaving. I turned to Matt, who was already gathering Sophie's things. Let's go. Lauren's face twisted in exaggerated shock. Oh my god, you are so dramatic. It was a joke. You're seriously going to ruin Christmas over this. This Christmas was ruined the second we walked in the door, Matt snapped. Lauren shot up from her seat, her face turning red as she immediately launched into full-blown hysteria. I can't believe this. I tried so hard to make this nice for everyone and you're just walking out? How could you do this to me? Matt ignored her, securing Sophie in her car seat while I grabbed our bags, and by now, everyone in the room was staring. Lauren's friends awkwardly looked away, my mother-in-law sat there in stony silence, and Lauren continued her tantrum, screaming about how we were tearing the family apart as we walked out the door. I turned back to look at her one last time, my voice calm and unwavering. No, Lauren. You did that all by yourself. And with that, we stepped out into the cold night, leaving her behind to deal with the consequences of her own actions. By the time summer rolled around, I had almost managed to put the disaster of Christmas behind me, though every now and then my sister-in-law Lauren would pop up on social media with her usual vague, passive-aggressive posts about how some people don't understand the meaning of family or how certain individuals make everything about themselves, and though she never named names, it was painfully obvious who she was talking about, especially when her mother, my ever-enabling mother-in-law, Janice, would comment things like, I know, sweetie, some people just don't appreciate everything you do, followed by an overuse of sad emojis. I ignored it for the most part, and so did Matt, because after the whole Christmas fiasco, we had made a conscious decision to stop feeding into Lauren's need for drama and attention, but that didn't mean she had stopped trying to insert herself into our lives, and sure enough, in early July, we received an invitation to a family barbecue that Lauren was hosting at her house with the message, let's put the past behind us and have a beautiful day together like a real family should, which sounded suspiciously like an order rather than an invitation, and Matt and I exchanged skeptical looks before he sighed and said, you know, if we don't go, she'll use it as another excuse to play the victim, and though I wanted to protest, I knew he was right, so we begrudgingly agreed to attend. The day of the barbecue, the heat was almost unbearable, the kind of suffocating summer air that made you want to stay indoors with the air conditioning blasting, and by the time we arrived at Lauren's house, sweat was already pooling at the back of my neck as I carried Sophie, now a year old and much more active, who squirmed in my arms, clearly irritated by the heat. Lauren greeted us with an overly sweet smile that immediately put me on edge, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and she clapped her hands together dramatically before saying, oh my god, look who decided to show up. I thought you guys might ditch at the last second, and though her tone was lighthearted, the underlying jab was clear, so I forced a tight-lipped smile and replied, well, we wouldn't want to miss such an important family gathering, hoping that would be enough to shut her up, but of course it wasn't. As we stepped into the backyard, I immediately noticed that Lauren had gone all out, stringing up decorations, setting up an elaborate outdoor dining area with neatly arranged place cards, as if this was some kind of wedding reception rather than a casual family barbecue, and despite the ridiculous effort she had clearly put into everything, the atmosphere felt tense, almost like everyone was bracing for something to go wrong. And sure enough, the passive-aggressive comments started before we had even had a chance to sit down. "Oh, Matt, I'm so glad you could make time for your family," Lauren said with a saccharine smile as she passed him a drink. "I know how busy you must be now that you guys have your perfect little home life," and Matt, to his credit, didn't take the bait, simply nodding and thanking her for the drink, but I could already see the irritation in his eyes, and I knew it was only a matter of time before Lauren escalated things further. As we sat at the table, making small talk with the rest of the family, Lauren continued her little digs, constantly making a point to compare Sophie to her dog, Bruno, in ways that were so absurd it was almost comical if it weren't so infuriating. "I mean, honestly, having a baby doesn't seem that different from having a puppy," she mused as she lazily twirled a piece of corn on the cob between her fingers. "They both need constant attention, they both make a mess of everything, and they both cry when they don't get what they want. At least Bruno sleeps through the night, though," and she let out a little laugh as if she had just cracked the funniest joke in the world. But I wasn't laughing, and neither was Matt, whose grip tightened around his fork as he took a slow breath before muttering, "Not today, Lauren," in a warning tone that she of course ignored. As the evening wore on, Lauren, clearly emboldened by the lack of immediate confrontation, began to present herself as the gracious, forgiving hostess, loudly making comments about how she was just so happy that everyone could finally be together again, how she believed in letting go of grudges, and how she was just so above all the unnecessary drama, which was, of course, hilarious, considering she was the sole reason there was drama in the first place. But she carried on her self-righteous monologue, oblivious to the increasing discomfort of everyone around her, until finally, someone snapped. It was Matt's cousin, Julia, a blunt, no-nonsense woman who had always seen through Lauren's manipulations but usually chose to stay out of the mess, and as Lauren went on and on about how she had been so deeply hurt by how some people had treated her but was choosing to be the bigger person, Julia suddenly set her drink down with a loud clank and said, "Oh, give me a break, Lauren. You're not some noble victim here. You spent months whining on social media about how betrayed you were, twisting the story so people would pity you, and now you're acting like you're some kind of saint for letting it go. No one's buying it." The table fell silent. Lauren's face paled and then immediately flushed red as she stammered, I don't know what you're talking about. I was just expressing my feelings." But Julia wasn't having it. "No, you were manipulating people, just like you always do, and honestly I'm sick of it. We're all sick of it." At that moment, several other relatives, who had clearly been holding back their own frustrations, chimed in with quiet but firm agreements, and as Lauren's gaze darted around the table, realization dawned on her. This wasn't just me and Matt who were tired of her games. Everyone was. Panic flashed across her face, and for the first time, she had no snarky comeback, no condescending remark, nothing to throw back at us, and instead, she did what she always did when things weren't going her way, she fled. Without another word, Lauren pushed back her chair, grabbed Bruno's leash, and stormed inside the house, slamming the door behind her, leaving the rest of us sitting in stunned silence before, finally, Julia let out a scoff and muttered, "Well, that was long overdue." And just like that, the tension broke, conversations resumed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, it actually felt like a family gathering. One where we didn't have to tiptoe around Lauren's fragile ego. One where we could actually breathe, and as I looked around at everyone chatting, laughing, finally free from the weight of Lauren's theatrics, I knew one thing for certain. Her reign of manipulation was over. By the time Christmas came around again, everything had changed. It was almost eerie how quickly Lauren's life had crumbled after the summer barbecue, as if the moment her grip on the family slipped, the rest of her world followed. At first, she fought against it, doubling down on her usual tactics, playing the victim, spinning elaborate sob stories, twisting reality to paint herself as the wounded, selfless sister who had only ever wanted a close-knit family. But something was different this time. No one was buying it. Not after years of her exhausting, manipulative behavior. The first real sign of her downfall came when her longtime boyfriend, Nathan, left her. Nathan had always been quiet, the kind of guy who stayed on the edges of conversations, never drawing too much attention to himself. But he had been with Lauren for nearly 3 years, and for a while, we had all assumed he had simply learned to tolerate her dramatics. Apparently, we had been wrong. The breakup wasn't just an ordinary split. It was a disaster. Lauren, as expected, didn't take it well. When Nathan moved out of their shared apartment, she didn't just let him leave. She called everyone she could, demanding sympathy, claiming he had blindsided her, that he was emotionally abusive, that he had brainwashed their mutual friends into turning against her. But Nathan, for the first time in their entire relationship, did something that Lauren never expected. He fought back. Instead of taking the quiet, guilt-ridden exit she had planned for him, he told people the truth, that he had been unhappy for years, that he had stayed because she controlled every aspect of his life, that he had spent more time walking on eggshells than actually enjoying their relationship, and that when he had finally had enough, she had tried to manipulate him into staying by threatening to ruin his reputation. And it worked. Not her manipulation, his honesty. People started talking. Friends who had previously stayed silent admitted that they had always been uncomfortable with how Lauren treated Nathan. Some of them cut ties with her completely. Others just distanced themselves. And for someone like Lauren, who thrived on being the center of attention, the slow unraveling of her social life was a fate worse than the breakup itself. But it didn't stop there. Around the same time, she lost her job. Now, Lauren had always been someone who acted as though she was untouchable at work, constantly boasting about how indispensable she was, about how her boss relied on her for everything. But what she didn't talk about was how that indispensability was really just her taking credit for other people's work, passing off responsibilities to coworkers while making herself look good in front of management. Apparently, they caught on. One day, she walked into the office as usual. By lunchtime, she was escorted out with a box of her belongings. The official reason was unprofessional conduct, but through the family grapevine, we heard that someone had filed a complaint about her hostile behavior, and when her manager started looking into it, they found a long list of issues that had been swept under the rug for years. Whatever the exact details were, one thing was clear: Lauren was out of a job and furious about it. And just like with Nathan, she refused to take responsibility. She called everyone, including Matt, sobbing about how she had been set up, how jealous coworkers had sabotaged her, how the world was so unfair and how no one was standing up for her. But by this point, even our mother-in-law Janice was done making excuses for her. That was, perhaps, the most shocking thing of all. For years, Janice had been Lauren's greatest enabler, her fiercest defender, the one person who could be counted on to swoop in and justify every tantrum, every cruel remark, every manipulative game she played. But even she couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. It wasn't just one incident. It wasn't just Matt and me, or Nathan, or her job. It was everyone. Janice didn't cut Lauren off completely. She was still her daughter. But something shifted. The blind loyalty was gone. The constant defending? Gone. The endless justifications? Gone. And that was when it finally happened. Lauren stopped calling. Stopped texting. Stopped posting. Stopped trying to control the narrative. She had lost. And for the first time in years, Matt and I were free. That December, as we set up our Christmas tree, as we hung stockings by the fireplace, as we wrapped presents for Sophie, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. No guilt-tripping phone calls. No last-minute demands to change our plans. No passive-aggressive comments about how we were excluding family. No staged meltdowns designed to make us feel like the worst people in the world. Just us, our little family, doing Christmas the way we had always wanted. On Christmas Eve, as Matt and I sat by the fire, watching Sophie attempt to grab the twinkling lights on the tree, I turned to him and said, "Can you believe we actually made it through the holidays without a single argument?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Honestly, it feels weird. But the good kind of weird." I nodded, resting my head against his shoulder. "We should make this our new tradition. Just us. No more chaos. No more guilt. Just a quiet, happy Christmas." Matt smiled. "Sounds perfect to me." And it was. For the first time, we weren't just surviving the holidays. We were enjoying them.